Good morning, Chair Bollendorf, members Garrett and Holmes, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you, Gretchen. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the board caucus meeting for the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board for Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. I'll now convene the meeting and jump right into our first agenda item, which is a legislative update by Mark Webster. So, Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Bollendorf and members Garrett and Holmes. The next big cutoff is Wednesday. So we've got a lot of floor action today and tomorrow, and then things go back to normal a little bit with committee meetings and the like. Since last week, a few things have happened. First, our second agency request bill, House Bill 1341, related to the medical cannabis excise tax exemption, passed the House yesterday. So not unanimous, but kind of close. The bill had a hearing early in session and passed the policy committee. And then it was just sitting in rules for a long, long time. We had a Senate vehicle too, but I'm just glad to not be waiting around as cutoff looms. So both of our agency request bills have passed the House of Origin. Great. House Bill 1515 that we've talked a lot about this session, the outdoor alcohol sales and the World Cup Fan Fest bill, passed on Saturday. I don't know that anyone is quite satisfied with it, but that's the legislative process for you. I think, hospitality would like to extend those privileges for a year or two. I think Seattle still wants lower costs, and I imagine public health, either didn't want it at all or wants to keep it at that sunset date close or soon. Yesterday's slate of bills in the Senate moved from rules to the floor, included Senate Bill 5206, which is that cannabis retail advertising bill that we've talked a lot about the last few years. Senate Bill 5403, which is around management agreements and trying to limit the number of cannabis retail businesses that people can influence or control. And then Senate Bill 5758, which is Senator Saldana's cannabis license buffer zone bills, trying to lower the buffer zones for where a cannabis retail place can be cited. And then finally, there's the tax study, the alcohol tax study bill got pulled to the floor back on Friday, and it's scheduled to be one of the first bills that the Senate takes action on this morning. On the House side, we've got the contract kitchens bill, 1602, on the floor. There's an amendment from the prime sponsor, just kind of making clear that the subcontractor is responsible for, the laws and rules governing a restaurant. So, they've got to make sure that they're paying attention to the health codes and things like that. The other contract kitchen or subcontracting bill, House Bill 1701, looks like it's going to get voted on here shortly today. And then once we get back into committee meetings, on Friday, the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee is going to take up the appointment for Board Member Holmes. So we'll see how that goes, but he'll be one of several appointees having hearings that day. There are a number of board and commission folks, and then also two agency heads, the directors of Employment Security and the director of Labor and Industries. So that's kind of an abbreviated update, but our bills have moved. The outdoor service bill is through, and now we're just kind of waiting to see what else we get before those committee meetings and the big appointment hearing for Board Member Holmes. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions from board members? All right, seeing none. Mark, thanks very much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll transition to our second agenda item, which is policy and rules team updates, and I'll turn it over to Justin Nordhorn.
All right, good morning. Good morning, Chair Bollendorf, members Garrett and Holmes. I have a brief update on the rule projects, and then I will slide right into our briefing for tomorrow's public hearing before I turn it over to Jeff. So currently we have 6 open rule projects. One is scheduled to begin in April. On the forefront, we've got the cannabis waste and cannabis sampling that's going to be presented at this week's board meeting. The lab accreditation transfer to agriculture. The public hearing is scheduled later this month, and I wanted to kind of call out an issue around this particular rule. So there seems to be some misperception in the industry that this rule is taking away the opportunity to do R&D samples, which this rule is only about transitioning lab accreditation from LCB to WSDA. And it has no other changes with that type of sampling. There is some confusion, I think, in the industry around what labs need to do on the samples that they are testing, and they have to be entered into this traceability system. However, there seems to be a misperception. We're getting a lot of emails around, why are you taking this away? And we're not. There's no changes in that particular regulation. And so we had, and I'll talk a little bit tomorrow about the cannabis sampling, of course, but during that sampling rule, their R&D concept came up, and I said we would probably have to do a separate rulemaking for that. So just FYI, I know there's been a lot of communication going around this topic, and I wanted you all to be aware of that. Go ahead, Jim.
I wanted to ask you, Justin, if you knew why there was that confusion. Where did that come from? What's the origin of that, if we have any idea?
I think that many labs were not entering some of the testing data when a licensee would submit something under R&D and non-mandatory testing. However, the rules don't differentiate between mandatory and non-mandatory testing. For the labs, all testing is supposed to be entered into the state traceability system. So I think when folks saw that these tests need to be entered, they're assuming that they can't do R&D. There's nothing preventing them from doing those types of tests. They just have to be entered by the lab into the system. Other than that, that's the core requirement. R&D is not defined in any rules right now. And so industry members have utilized that term as a function around these non-mandatory tests. But just all of the testing needs to be into the system. And so that's where I think the confusion generates. And then it's gone between labs and licensees. And so we've gotten several comments about don't take away this, and there's nothing being taken away.
We've all gotten letters, I believe, too. Yeah. So thank you for that clarification. Board Member Garrett, I see your hand up. At one point, did you get your question answered?
You asked the question I was going to ask.
Been hanging out with you too long in these meetings. All right. Thank you, Justin. Go ahead.
So we also have minors on premises. So we are going to be presenting a supplemental CR 102 to you all in the near future. And so that one is not moving into the final rule development. We're going to do the supplemental on that. And that is the minors on premises for cannabis producers and processors. And so we're going to be making some significant changes in that rule set. Acceptable forms of ID and alcohol product placement. We just launched recently, and we're doing stakeholder engagement this week. So we had a really good turnout yesterday. We have another one on Thursday. So we're also going to be, we're planning on launching the seasonal hours so it can be in effect before the fall comes around for the alcohol businesses. So that's going to be launching in April. And then on the petition side, we have 4 active petitions. All of the responses are due mid to late April. And one of them is for an RCW change, which of course we can't necessarily affect a change in RCW. We also have requests around allowing cannabis concentrates to be sold in single 7-gram packages, as well as removing the requirements around cannabis edibles to have each to have individual wrapping for each piece that's within the childproof packaging. And then the last one is green cards to be accepted as acceptable forms of ID. We already have some similar petitions. We have that rule project open, and so that'll just be kind of folded into, we still have to provide the response, but that'll be folded into that area. So that's the update before I move into the hearing tomorrow. But Member Holmes.
Really quickly, what's the magic of that 7-gram amount that you mentioned for the separate sale?
Yeah, so the stores can't sell more than 7 grams of concentrate. And there's some possession limits in statute around that, but we broke it down to say no more than, concentrate can't be greater than 1 gram per individual package. And what they're asking for is if the consumer can have up to 7 grams and the store can actually sell up to 7 grams, the interest is being able to create packages with 7 grams total, instead of having the smaller size packages. So that's what that particular,
But again, what's the magic of the 7 gram amount? Why not 10? Why not 5?
statute.
Okay, so we have a 1 gram limit now. Is that the point?
Yes, for individual packaging, we have a 1 gram limit.
Okay, thanks.
And so they can sell up to 7 of those. So they're asking, can we not sell 7 grams together, reducing packaging and those types of things? So that's what the ask is.
I'm sorry. So then the statute also limits it to 7 sales at a time? Okay. All right. Thanks.
Justin, just quickly, certainly look forward to hearing more about these rule petitions, but I do want to say something that I've said in an earlier meeting, that I do feel like we need to think about multiple things, and I know you and your team will as we're looking at these things. You obviously mentioned agency authority already in your first example, but do we have the staff capacity? How many open rule petitions do we have right now? What's a reasonable amount of time that you think it'll respond, etc.? I mean, just looking at the fact that we're going to be coming out of a legislative session and all the rules making that will happen after leg session. So just keeping that in mind. And I know as an individual board member, when we're thinking about and when I'm considering whether we should take a rule petition, I'm going to be looking at it through all of those lenses in terms of whether I decide to vote, whether we would accept a rule petition at this time or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of coupling with what Mark's update was, I'm tracking 16 active bills right now that are still alive that would require rulemaking. And so, of course, we don't expect all of those to pass, but if they do, that's a large workload that we have to consider coming in.
Yeah, and if they did all pass, that would be accepting a rule petition that we probably wouldn't be able to get to for a year or two, or just way down the road, and that doesn't seem like a reasonable time frame to respond to something. So, okay, thank you.
Excellent. So just to preview tomorrow's public hearing. So tomorrow we have a public hearing on the cannabis sample rules. And so that started off with a petition from the Washington Cannabis Business Association back in August of 2022. Since then, we've had this CR 101 was filed in March of 23, and then we've had stakeholder engagements in March and October of 23. We also sent out some surveys to licensees in July of 23, and then the CR 102 was filed in August of 24. And so when we're looking at this particular rule, that we'll be requesting approval if there are no comments tomorrow during the public hearing, or that we receive in the formal public comment. And to this date, we've had no comments for the supplemental CR 102. So I think we hammered out a lot of those details with the industry in the interim between the 102 and the supplemental 102. And so then we would bring it back to the board on March 26th if there's no additional changes that are needed for an effective date of April 26th. So the initial CR 102 made a number of changes to WAC 314-55-096. We combined the existing categories of vendor and education samples into one trade sample category. We separated, we're requiring separation for storage purposes of samples and other product for resale. Determining quarterly limits on how many samples could be provided to employees. There was some clarification that samples could only be provided to a retailer who wants them, because there was a lot of samples being delivered that they didn't ask for, and they can't, having a difficult time managing. Modifying requirements for the sample jars, and then also we had other changes that I'll go into a little bit more detail tomorrow on. So the supplemental CR 102 was filed January 29th of 2025, and there's been no public comments as of this date. And so we made the following changes in the supplemental, and that was increasing the quarterly limit per employee. We had feedback on that, so we raised that limit from 15 to 30. We clarified that the sample jars themselves wouldn't have to be with all of the other samples. They could be on display for consumers to interact with, just to make it clear that there would be no confusion. Clarifying the difference between the internal quality control samples and types of samples that are used for quality control testing being sent to a lab. So the internal quality control is samples that go to employees to consume to make sure that they have the internal quality, not necessarily the lab testing. And so we differentiated that in these sampling rules. Removing references that had been introduced in the 102 around per harvest and per batch. We just went with per employee over a period of time to simplify this for both stakeholders and our staff operationally. And then identifying a wind down period, basically that any of the current samples that would be in the retail stores would have to be disposed of come September 1st. That way, both types of samples could be provided right now, but at September 1st, the old sample style, which are the smaller components that aren't representative of the actual product being sold, would have to be no longer present in the stores. And so I'll give mostly the same introduction tomorrow before the public hearing. Because of the nature of the public hearing, of course, I won't be able to answer any questions during the public hearing or respond to any testimony provided until after the hearing has concluded. And so happy to answer any questions for you on this today.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions for Justin this morning? All right, seeing none.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay, we will now transition to the next agenda item, which is
I think we have
proposed.
Jeff.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Jeff. You're up next. Sorry. Going back to you. Oh, Ollie, do you have a question? Probably just-
Yes, I was going to see if Justin was going to introduce us to our new policy and rules manager.
Oh, thank you. Good
I
call.
absolutely I absolutely can. My apologies. So Kevin, if you'd like to turn your camera on. Kevin Walder has joined us as the new policy and rules manager. So he will be coming before you at these board meetings, providing these types of updates. He started last week, so he's still kind of getting his feet wet. Or basically thrown into the deep end, as we like to describe it. He comes from LNI. He has many years of experience engaging in rulemaking. He has a background in DOSH, which is public safety and health and safety, related to businesses, employment, those types of things. And so I think it's a real nice fit. He also has some training that he's gone through around organizational change management. The ProSci training is typically what people refer to. So he's bringing a lot of skill sets to the board that we're really excited about, and we're happy to have Kevin. So I don't know, Kevin, if you wanted to say a few words.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. Hi, Ollie. It's a pleasure to meet you as well. I had an opportunity to meet the other two board members last week, yeah, I'm just really looking forward to being involved with all the important work going on here. And yeah, I'm just kind of absorbing everything right now, but I look forward to getting more involved in sharing these updates with the board. Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Great, and welcome, Kevin. We're glad that you're part of our team. And my brief conversation with you last week, I feel confident that you will fit right in and do well in your role. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, now I will transition to Jeff before going on to our next agenda item. So Jeff, I apologize for skipping right over you. We will now have you on the agenda regarding cannabis waste.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Chair Volendroff and board members Garrett and Holmes. At tomorrow's board meeting, I will present the CR 103 permanent rulemaking package that finalizes the rule changes to implement substitute Senate Bill 5376, which allows the sales of cannabis plant waste materials such as cannabis plant roots. This rulemaking package explains the conditions and requirements for sales of waste from cannabis producer or processor licensees to people who are not cannabis licensees. These rule amendments, which only affect one section, WAC 314-55-097, allow for the selling of this cannabis plant waste material if it contains a THC concentration of 0.3% or less. And this is permitted under certain conditions. The rule amendments create a definition of sellable cannabis waste and establish the conditions that must be met when the sale is made, including reporting of the sale in advance by the licensee to both the Washington Department of Agriculture and the LCB. We held a virtual public stakeholder meeting regarding sales of cannabis waste on September 4th, 2025. The CR 102 was filed on January 15th, 2025, and we received 4 comments during the informal comment period. One member of the public also spoke on the proposed rules at the public hearing last week on 2 weeks ago on February 26th. I will provide a brief overview of the amendments to the rule when I present the CR 103 package tomorrow. If the CR 103 is approved and filed with the Office of the Code Revisor, the final rule will take effect on April 12th, 2025. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff this morning? All right, seeing none, Jeff, we will see you tomorrow in the board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we will transition to the next agenda item, which is board efficiencies. And this is an item that I have asked to be on the agenda this morning. So as board chair, my commitment to my fellow board members in the community is to ensure that we operate with efficiency and transparency and with a strong commitment to community engagement and leadership. A key part of that is making sure that our meetings are structured in a way that allows us to be productive, have meaningful discussions, and to make well-informed decisions. So in the time that I've been the board chair, I have worked hard to have productive meetings, whether it be board meetings or meaningful conversations in these caucus meetings, and encourage participation from a broad stakeholder group. And I've received feedback from some and experienced firsthand that our meetings could be more productive. In keeping with Governor Ferguson's goals of government efficiency and customer service, I'd like to open a discussion with my fellow board members this morning and offer proposals on how we structure certain meetings in which we participate. And I'll share the anticipated benefits, reinforcing innovation, accountability, and meaningful community impact. A couple of things I want to make sure that we're clear about is I want to be clear this is not a proposal for a vote today. No decisions will be made in this particular meeting. Rather, this is an opportunity for us to step back and consider whether there are ways we can improve our work together, whether it's in how we structure or manage meetings or how as board members we allocate our time. My proposals will focus on 3 meetings. It'll focus on the board meeting, it'll focus on the caucus meeting, and it'll focus on executive management team. I remain open if either one of you have additional topic areas you want to bring up, or if there's things in the future that we decide that align with the previously stated goals of commitment to operational efficiency and transparency and community engagement and leadership. I encourage you both to share your thoughts and experience and ideas. My goal is to explore options and to ensure our meetings continue to serve our mission and responsibilities effectively. So based on what I hear today, I will draft a proposal and I will bring that to you at tomorrow's board meeting. I'll then ask for a motion granting me as the chair the authority to govern the proceedings and implement the proposed changes. So with that framework, I will like to begin the discussion on focusing on board meeting itself and sharing my proposals and my thought behind each of the recommendations. What I thought I would do is talk specifically about board meetings. I think I have 3, maybe 4 different suggestions in board meetings. I'll stop at that point and open it up for discussion. We'll have a discussion, then I'll move to board caucus. Same thing, share my proposals, have a conversation, and then transition into the final executive management team discussion. So does that sound okay to both of you, or do you have any thoughts or questions before I jump into my proposal? All right. So in terms of the board meeting, board meetings currently happen every 2 weeks, as you know. It's labor intensive and it's time consuming. I propose that we transition from bi-weekly meetings to monthly meetings to better align with the timing of key updates and to provide staffing flexibility and efficiency. The current structure requires a significant amount of preparation, including agenda development, meeting preparation, minutes, and logistical coordination. By reducing the frequency of meetings, staff and board can allocate more of our time to execute strategic initiatives and operational priorities rather than spending excessive time in meeting preparation and attendance. A monthly meeting schedule also allows for more comprehensive discussion with well-prepared reports and recommendations. Instead of reacting to issues in short intervals, the board can focus on strategic, high-impact decisions with a clearer long-term perspective. I do see us maintaining the flexibility to call special meetings to address urgent or time-sensitive matters if necessary. My second proposal related to the board meeting is related to public comment. I propose we transition from oral public comment to written format for the following reasons. I believe this change will improve decision-making and thoughtful review by the board. Board members will have more time to carefully read and analyze public comment. This proposed change reduces redundancy and streamlines meetings. Meetings often involve repetitive testimony where multiple speakers reiterate the same points. A written format prevents unnecessary repetition while ensuring all arguments are considered. My final point on this change is that it encourages more thoughtful and detailed public input. Written testimony allows individuals to present thorough and well thought out supported arguments, including citations and data and evidence to support their position, which are often difficult to convey in a short oral statement. This ensures that complex issues receive the depth of discussion they deserve rather than being condensed into the current 3-minute time frame. My final proposal related to the board meeting is that I propose we decouple the public hearing process for rule petitions between CR 102 and CR 103 from the board meeting itself. I propose the public hearings be conducted on a different day at a different time and to be managed by the rules team, which I believe will lead to a more focused discussion. It keeps rule hearings separate, ensuring that all comments are directly relevant to the proposed regulations being considered, leading to clearer and more constructive decisions. I also believe this is a better use of public input. This prevents general concern from being lost in technical rule discussion and allows the agency and board to give appropriate alternative to attention to each type of feedback. So I know that was a lot to take in. I promise my proposals related to the other meetings are shorter in nature. But with that, I'd like to hear your thoughts on my proposals and hear your additional comments or suggestions. So I'll open it up for conversation. And I'm happy to go back and go over any of these points if necessary.
This is Ali. On the first two, I think it's good and it frees up time where we can look at getting back into things and to focus on things that we used to do. Before you all joined the board, and it's been probably now since COVID, we used to have where each board member were responsible for certain things. So we had advisory groups and meetings.
I remember hearing about those, but I've never seen them in practice.
Where we would bring in people for different things. So we had the alcohol advisory group, we had the cannabis advisory group, and then we had the tribe advisory. So what we would do, and each board member was responsible for one of those. And I think at the time we didn't have our tribal liaison. But what we would do is the cannabis advisory group, I was over that one, and would reach out to different organizations that have cannabis organizations or some type of input into the cannabis industry, we formed our own committee, and we would have committee meetings and talk about what's going on in that industry. The alcohol advisory was consisted of the wine industry, the alcohol, just different things. And we would bring them in and have meetings. I think one of the things that we didn't have that I hear a lot of conversation around is health and things and whatever organizations that responsible or work in that area. But it would give us time to get back to having those type of meetings and reaching out and hearing from the community under those areas and knowing what's going on. So I think that frees up, it frees up, but at the same time, it get us where we have the opportunity to think about other things that we can be doing. And it's going to, as you stated, would give us more time to think about the testimonies if they're coming in and we're having a chance to review them and have thoughtful conversations, around them instead of just hearing something, as you say, in the 3 minutes. I don't know yet about the transitioning the CR 102 or 103 just yet. I want to think about that one a little more to say, are we ready to do something like that?
Yeah. Just to be clear on that one, board member Garrett, is what I'm proposing at this point is that we still maintain all authorities. The only thing I'm suggesting is that we move the hearings, which currently happen at the board meeting, to a different time and place, and that they're decoupled from the board meeting. All other, whether we accept a rule petition, approval of each one of them along the step, and final approval would still be with the board at this particular time. It's just moving the hearing from the board meeting. And it is, I experienced it at our last board meeting where there were comments made on at each point in time related to different topics. I think it's confusing sometimes to people. So that's the only proposal that I'm making at this point on that regard.
Right. And if we're going to just public comments, I think that takes away the confusion if there's a board meeting that's centered around public hearing.
Right.
So I just, it's too much, I think, at once.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Appreciate that feedback. Member Holmes?
Thank you, Chairman Bolendroff. I just had a couple of comments. First of all, I welcome this discussion. I'm new to the board, and so basic things like the frequency and even the dates that we have would be a welcome discussion for me to have. I think that we all want to make sure that we're able to interact on a schedule that allows us to, free exchange of our ideas. And reminding everyone that, of course, we're very limited by the Open Public Meetings Act, and we faithfully adhere to those requirements, especially in that we're a 3-member board and we constitute a quorum if we have a 2-person conversation. So a lot of times we're talking through issues for the very first time in public, as that's intended to do, especially for final matters. And I also wanted to comment that being familiar with the OPMA through my prior work, I note that the board is currently very generous about our acceptance of public comment. It's only required in the case of final actions, of course. And I just want to echo something that I have found in my short time on the board, that the nature of those comments, particularly when they're in writing, are incredibly helpful to me. And I think that the last example of the changes that we have brought to the minors on premises rulemaking is an example where some of the comments were so helpful that I could have gone along with verbatim changes, verbatim acceptance of the written comments. And so they're very, very helpful in that way. I just want to state that as a preference. I also wanted to let my fellow board members know that just yesterday, I spent several hours at the Capitol, spoke to most of the senators on the Labor and Commerce Committee that oversees us and also is responsible for confirmations. I'm really hopeful that as we talk about these structural changes, the board will emerge with, a fully confirmed board. Right now, there's one member confirmed on the board, and my hope is that because we do have such a well balanced and diverse and professional board that is dedicated to the mission, I'm looking forward to being able to examine how we do things. I can tell you that our senators are all quite interested in the operations of the board. They have their own issues that they want to discuss. And I think as we go along, we should make sure that we're engaging with that group. I mean, there are licensees, there's the public, and then there's also, the legislature, because they actually do set important things like taxes and our basic enabling statute and all the parameters that we operate under. I did want to just summarize with a quick question. As we're looking at I love a board member Garrett's comment and suggestion about advisory groups. I think they might also be not only organized by subject matter, but also by constituency, breaking down, for instance, producers versus retailers and all of that. If people want a forum where they can speak, that's a great opportunity there. I'm wondering, I don't know the answer to this question, whether it's possible that we can still preserve a way for oral testimony to be submitted virtually, to be able to be recorded, for instance. And in that way, if there was a portal on our website where oral public comments can be made, in appearing in person, they would also have the advantage of being accessible for the public, not just us, but the public. And that is the one thing, if we're going to consider a change, that might also capture all the benefits to the public of the current arrangement with one going forward that enables us to work more efficiently. That's all I have to say on that, but I would love to have staff take a look at the possibility that, individuals could submit comments via a video clip. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Holmes. I certainly believe we would be able to make accommodations for special requests for that for sure. And we'll consider, think about that more. The thing that I really appreciate about the board meeting and caucus in particular is that we can have these types of discussions. And I have to say that I feel like that's really an important part of what we do, is have these relevant kinds of conversations in this public setting that helps set the agenda for the agency. And I mentioned before about a strategic plan for the board and really thinking about where we want to go and where we want to head. And some of the changes that I'm proposing are with that in mind. It gives us more time to consider those types of experiences for the board. So, all right, any other comments about the proposed changes related to the board meeting itself? Board Member Holmes?
I just wanted to add a quick comment that, the OPMA requirements are why I'm using this caucus as an opportunity to tell my fellow board members about my visit to the Capitol yesterday and speaking with the senators in the wings while both houses were in session. And I just wanted to add that I saw our legislative director hard at work. Mark Webster was there, and he was obviously he had quite a list of legislation that he was continuing to follow. So again, thank you.
Sounds like it was an overall good experience for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Great. Glad to hear that. Board Member Garrett, anything related to the proposed changes regarding the board meeting? Okay, so with that, I'd like to now share my proposals related to the board caucus. If we move to a monthly schedule for board meetings, it only makes sense that we decrease the frequency of caucus meetings. I propose the board meet for caucus every other week to discuss agency business to better align with the timing of key updates and to provide staffing flexibility and efficiency. The current meeting cadence is labor intensive and time consuming. Both in-person and online attendance will continue to be available to the public. This is my only proposed change to the board caucus meetings at this time. So I'd like to hear your thoughts and maybe any other proposed changes you might suggest for board caucus meetings.
I think It goes along with what you're proposing for the board meetings. And we are not saying at any point in time if there needs to be an additional caucus or board meeting based on anything that's going on. We still have that option, correct?
That's right. Both this proposal for both the board meeting and the caucus would allow us the flexibility to call a special meeting, given the required 24-hour advance notice that we have.
Thank you.
Board Member Holmes, any comments? All right, so my final recommendation for today relates to the executive management team meeting. As you know, this is a monthly meeting that includes the board, agency directors, and division directors. I propose that these meetings remain on a monthly cycle and that we transition to having a single board member attend these meetings on a rotating basis. The board member who attends the meeting would be expected to provide a summary at caucus, updating the rest of the board. The meeting is currently structured, the meeting as it is currently structured amounts to a report out by LCB leadership as opposed to what I consider to be an executive management team meeting. It would be more efficient given the current structure to have a single board member attend and then bring relevant reports or agenda items discussed to caucus for deeper, more thoughtful and detailed discussion. I propose the name of the meeting also be changed to better reflect the purpose of the meeting. So that is the only suggestion I have related to the executive management team, and that includes my proposals. So I'd like to now hear your thoughts related to my proposed changes to the executive management team meetings.
This is Ali. Just food for thought. So executive management team meetings turn to more of a report out from the various divisions.
Yeah.
We had actually made it where it was tailored to a conversation or something that was going on. So if there was something going on, a hot item or something with enforcement, then the EMT meeting would be us bringing the enforcement in and advising us and telling us what's happening, what are you doing to address this, whatever those issues are, if it was something with licensing, whatever it was, but it was more of a tailored meeting, and it wasn't the entire agency. It was tailored to um, licensing, tailored to enforcement, tailored to the other areas. So it turned into being a more report out. We had gone from where we are now with this whole staff there because they didn't have anything new to talk about and made it more tailored based on a division. And at that rate, it could be that all three board members are at the it's still executive management team and having them come in, but tailored on licensing, update us on what's going on, what are you doing in your area. That report turned to be more tailored instead of around the room with each division. And we found that to be more effective because what would happen before EMT, Dustin at the time would reach out to everyone to say, do you have anything? Do you have anything? And people wouldn't have anything. And that's how we got to the more tailored meetings.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think, from my perspective, the having a single board member come and then bring it to caucus, when I look at, and I do look at the attendance, like who's coming to these meetings, who's showing up. There's very few members of the public that show up in the executive management team meetings. And it just seems like the caucus meeting is an even more transparent place for us to have some of those detailed conversations. And so having a single person, board member, participate and then come back. We could also invite members of the executive management team to participate with us as well. So just a couple more thoughts about that.
And it's never been to where the EMT was where it was a lot of public there.
Yeah.
That's never been the case. It's been our time as the board members to talk to whoever that person is. Like the board caucus is our time to talk to each other.
Right.
EMT was the board, our time to all talk to, if it was tailored to license, talk to Becky, ask questions and get answers. So it was more of us now engaging with whatever that target subject or division was. Not a
Mm-hmm.
board caucus discussion. Board caucus is us talking to each other, but this
Mm-hmm.
was us now talking to that staff person of that division or whatever the subject matter was.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind, that that was the difference between the two. EMT was never where it was a lot of public. It's open to the public, but it's never been the public
Right.
listening in and stuff, which it doesn't matter. I mean, it's on TVW and the other, so it's not to keep the public out, but that was never what it was about.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. I always
Yeah.
appreciate the history that you bring to the board based on your tenure of time on the board. So thank you for that.
Right. And I think the reason if we do it that way and that it should be all three board members is we get to ask the question. We get to talk and have the dialogue with that subject matter or that person or whatever that is at that time. The board caucus is for us unless
Right.
they have something different to bring to us. Yeah.
But isn't just a point of clarification? So board caucus is a discussion amongst the board members, but it's
Right.
not unheard of that we identify a content expert that we want to have come to caucus to
That's correct.
educate us and to, okay,
Right.
great. Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Board member Holmes?
Just an observation, again, as a newbie. It is the subject of the executive management team meetings that I think best demonstrates your concern about efficiency in the agency as a whole. And the very fact that we have to rotate to comply with the letter of the law, even though we're not making decisions in EMT meetings, they're information that the board needs to have, but you essentially have to do it once for each board member, as opposed to having everyone there to ask questions, have a discussion, and receive the same information at the same time. You know, in the law, we always joke about the burn rate, you know, the hourly rate times the number of lawyers in the room. And this is an example, I think, of where staff time can, you know, be tripled essentially to deal with some of the same issues. So anyway, I welcome the change, rotating. That was one of my first learning lessons, was when I wanted to attend one of the very first ones. And I think our chairman was already there. And then to be reminded that, well, both of you can't be there, that would be a quorum. And so anyway, I tend to just say what's on my mind. And that's an example of how we have to operate. And it always makes efficiency a concern. So anyway, I appreciate again that you're looking at these. I agree with the suggestion about rotating attendance, and we'll make the most of that.
So Pete, the example you just gave where there was already a board member and it would have make it a quorum, that was something outside of EMT, wouldn't it have been? That couldn't have been EMT. That must have
Right,
been something else.
That would have probably been a public hearing or probably a public hearing, because the executive management team is all three of us currently participating. And
Right.
my
Right,
my proposal would be that one of us attend and then bring that agenda discussion or that discussion to caucus.
Mm-hmm. I'll go back and
So-
check which meetings it was, but it was
Okay.
a regular meeting.
Right. So, are you, I think, and Pete, it might have been director's meeting or staff something, but so
it was.
Jim, are you saying EMT stays name it something else, but stays the same with all the divisions? And what I'm saying, with it being more tailored to a subject, that's something that gets brought to caucus. Is that what you're saying?
Let me make sure, let me rephrase what I'm saying to make sure I'm hearing what you're saying. And that is, I'm saying that executive management team would continue to be monthly. It would have the same configuration of attendance other
Okay.
than, as opposed to all three board members going at the same time, we would send one board member to that. And that
Okay.
board member would then come back and share with the rest of the board members at caucus what the agenda was and what was covered. And we would have a more detailed discussion at caucus about any items that come from the executive management team.
Okay. So the more tailored conversation, if we wanted licensing to come and update us on what's going on, where they are, well, and not the norm report out, something specific tailored, you're saying to bring that to caucus, not EMT.
Well, I think that the conversation, it could still happen at EMT, Ollie. What I'm saying is then the board member who's in attendance would bring it to caucus and we would have a more broad discussion about it amongst all three board members in that way.
But also with that staff person,
I
because
think
now we're
that's
not
a good
having it.
question. I think I
Yeah,
would leave that up to the board member who attended the executive management team to
to
make the
invite, right.
decision whether they would
Okay.
invite that person in to our caucus meeting or whether they felt like they had sufficient information to convey whatever the agenda item was. I could see it going both ways, I guess, is my point.
Okay, that's good. All right.
Okay. Yes, board member Holmes?
I believe it was a division directors meeting that was one
Yes.
of my early learning experiences, but it still begs the same question, and perhaps we need to consult again with our assigned assistant attorney general about this. But under the proposal that you're talking about with the EMT, then would even though we would be a rotating assignment, would it preclude someone that's not presently assigned from attending? Do you have the time?
Well, the way that it's structured now, it's subject to the OPMA, and so we would change that. If only one board member comes, we will probably, it wouldn't be open to the OPMA, so it would change that part of it. We probably then wouldn't have TVW participate in that particular meeting. So there are structural changes that would occur that should a second board member show up, it changes the meeting, and we would have to consider that. And I would propose that we not do it in that way, that we either leave it like it is now, or we make the change and just have a rotating board member go through.
Got it. Well, I think this whole conversation is very helpful. It does demonstrate how we're focused on really one thing. It's about how to achieve greater efficiencies in the work of the board. And we have to do that in an open, clear manner. And I appreciate the conversation. So.
Terrific. All right, board member Garrett, anything else to add? All right. So as I previously stated, well, first of all, let me stop and say I appreciate each one of you, and I appreciate the space in which we have, the limited space in which we have to have these types of conversation. I think it's important. I think it really is ultimately our role and responsibility to have these kind of dialogues in public so that we're signaling and giving to the community and our licensees and our staff a clear direction on where we see the agency going in terms of policy. And I look forward to working with each of you on implementation of any of the changes that we propose today. So as I previously stated, based on what I've heard, I'm going to draft a proposal and I'll share this with you in tomorrow's board meetings. And then I'll be asking for a motion granting me as the chair the authority to govern the proceedings and implement the proposed changes. I'll assign timelines to things so everybody's very clear on when things will happen at what time so that we're making sure that we're giving the public notice about when these things would take effect should we adopt them. All right, so with that, that concludes this part of our agenda. I will now transition us to our final agenda item, which is board member and executive assistant reports. Anything from any of board members to report? All right,
I think that covered everything.
Yes,
Thank you.
I was going to say that this is, and for future, this is a good time to share your experience up at the Capitol. And I mean, you took the time earlier, which is totally fine as well. But this is a really good opportunity for us to, if we've gone to a meeting or we've met with somebody that we want to share that experience, etc. This is our time to do that. Okay, so Gretchen, any executive assistant reports from either you or Deb?
Nothing today, Chair. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks very much. I appreciate the rich discussion. And again, I appreciate my board members. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.